far in Chapter 12, in 12.1, we calculated our regular earnings and overtime earnings. Okay? We had to take a look at how many hours they worked for regular, multiply that by the regular rate, and that gave us our regular earnings. Overtime was a little tricky because you had to calculate your overtime rate, and your overtime rate is your regular rate times 1.5. You multiply your overtime hours by your overtime rate, it gives you overtime hours, add the two together, and that is your total earnings. Please remember, earnings is before deductions. In section 12.2, we learned about our types of deductions, and the types of deductions that we learned about was your federal income tax, and we had to use your book. We had those tax tables. The first thing you had to figure out, is this person single or are they married? Because that determined which page you looked at. And the next thing we had to know is after they're single or married, we had to figure out how many withholding allowances they had. And remember, the first column was 0, then we did 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think it went up to 10 for withholding allowances. And then you had to figure out how much their earnings were. And remember, you have at least but less than. And you needed to choose the correct amount. And all you had to do is go through, look up the number. And do you have to have that chart memorized? It will always be given to you, okay? But make sure that you bring your book with you because it makes your life a lot easier, okay? The other type of deduction that we learned about on Friday was FICA. Okay. FICA is composed of Social Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare are going to be taxed based on a percentage. So you're going to take your total earnings, and then you're going to multiply it by your percent for Social Security, which was 6.2%, and your Medicare, which is 1.45%. They will always give you those percentages in the directions as well, so you don't have to remember the percentages. The interesting thing that we had, though, is we had something called a tax base. And this is always the part that tricks students up. Remember, once you've earned, according to our textbook, $87,000, you no longer need to pay Social Security or Medicare tax. So if one paycheck I'm at $8,690, and then in my next paycheck, how much of it is going to be taxable? If I made $86,990, so how much would be taxable for Social Security on the next paycheck? 10. Only $10, because I only pay taxes up to $87,000. Once I reach $87,000, I don't take off. So I could have a paycheck that I only do Social Security and Medicare on just a portion of it, because I only pay up to that tax base. Okay, so it's important to remember that. And your tax percentages for Social Security and Medicare are going to be set by Congress, as well as the tax base is always set by an act of Congress, so they can change it at any given point. So we went through and we calculated our regular earnings, we calculated overtime, total earnings, and then we calculated the deductions. The other type of deductions that we could have would be insurance. And typically for insurance, I would have to know if you're single or married, and then typically married insurance costs more because it covers more people. Doesn't matter the amount of withholdings you have, you're just going to have, insurance will be based on single or married. And if you're single, you're going to have one amount, and if you're married, you have another. And not all employers take out amount of money for insurance, but it is the case. The type of insurance that you could have withheld would be health insurance, you could have vision insurance, you could have dental insurance. Life insurance is not typically one that would be withheld from your paycheck, but that is another type of insurance. Sometimes it's given just as a flat benefit to the employees, and they don't have to pay anything for it. Other types of deductions that would be United Way donations and U.S. savings bonds. And what we need to do for payroll is we have to go through and put our information on a form so that way we could go through and see everything for a pay period. And that form is going to be this, a payroll register. When we take a look at a payroll register, I'm still not saying debits and credits. Okay? When I take a look at a payroll register, right here I have earnings and I have deductions. I need to actually scroll a little bit to the right because my monitors are not as big as yours. But when we take a look at our earnings and our deductions, do you see how those headings separate the top? Okay? Make sure we put that away, please, Jordan. When we go through and calculate our payroll register, we need to be aware of under which heading we're on. Really, truly, earnings is what we learned in 12.1. Deductions, we learned the first three columns, Social Security, Medicare, and federal income tax. We didn't really do anything with health insurance or the other, and we didn't really total anything for our deductions. But what we have to do is when I'm an employer, I'm going to go through and I'm going to have one of these anytime I have to pay my employees. This is important information because I have information per employee, but then I also have totals for a pay period. Totals for a pay period allows me to make decisions for the business on whether or not I'm spending too much money on payroll, because payroll is an expense to a business. Most businesses have to have payroll, otherwise they're not going to be able to operate because one person cannot physically do all of the work. Okay, so when you take a look at Quick Trip in town, can they do everything with just one person? Okay. Don't forget about the truck driver that needs to get the stuff there. And the store has to be open. Right? So when you physically think about all the different tasks that need to be done, you have to have different people, so you have to have payroll. Once you get past a small service business, you get into merchandising business, you have to have multiple people. Now, you'll see on the left-hand side, we have our employee numbers still. We have their names, and notice right here in the payroll register, we have a married or single column because that helps us for determining our federal income tax. And we also have a spot here where we have our number of withholding allowances because that is also important for using our federal income tax. These two are percentages. Health insurance and other will always be given to you in the directions. So they'd always say that Libby is having $30 taken out for U.S. savings bonds, but Abby is not. So then I could have something in other for Libby, but not for Abby. You have to read the directions, or, for example, each employee would have it filled out. So each pay period, I have to go through and fill out a payroll register. And right now, it's nice and short. There's only 2 employees. Now think about the business that you work at. How many employees are there? Okay. Now think about it. They have to go through and do a payroll register for each one of those individuals. After the payroll register is done and proved, you can prove a payroll register, not debits and credits, but you can prove that everything equals, and I'll teach you how to do that today. You have to fill out an employee's earnings record. This is an employee earnings record. Remember at the end of the year when you have to get your W-2 sent to you? And the W-2 is all of the information related to you. All of that is going to be generated from an employee's earnings record. At any given point, you should be able to walk into your employer and say, can you tell me what my total earnings are so far this year? Can you tell me what my total net pay is so far this year? Net pay is different than earnings. When we take a look at here, this is total earnings. This is everything pre-tax, pre-deductions. Net pay right here is going to be physically the amount that you are taking home per paycheck. Now, it's important that we know this for each person in our business because we need to know about that tax base. Okay? Is tax base going to be earnings or net pay is it based off of? Because they're two separate things. And this is oftentimes confusing for students. What do we think? That $87,000 tax base, is it going to be based on total earnings or net pay? Total earnings. Why do you say that? Yep. And it's always going to be based off total earnings or the amount that you physically have earned from the job because that is what we base all of our taxes off, is taxes are going to be based on your earnings, not physically what you take home or your net pay. So each employee, when I'm taking a look at Dylan's, I need to look at Dylan's and I need to see if his total earnings right here for the year is over $87,000, I need to know, guess what? No more Social Security and Medicare tax gets taken out. But Devin just started, so he's not at $87,000, so I need to know that Devin still gets Social Security and Medicare. This employee earnings record will give me that information. So the order that it gets completed is you're going to go through first for a business and complete the payroll register. That's going to give me the snapshot for the whole business of how much I need to pay for payroll and how much goes to each person. Once you have your employee or your payroll register done, you transfer that information that you've already calculated up here onto your employee's earnings record. So you don't have to recalculate anything new except for something at the end here called accumulated earnings. Please note, half of you are going to get this column wrong on the test. What is this word right here? Earnings. Where is earnings also referenced on this document? Here. Okay? A lot of times students, when they get to this point, they think it has to do with this number. But remember, it says the word earnings, so I have to get it from this. It'll make more sense when we go through and try to do it. Okay? You're going to want to open up your book to page 347 and 348. I will turn this assignment on for you. Our directions for work together and on your own, 12.3. It tells me the first thing I need to do is complete the payroll registry for Judy Hensley and Mike McCune for the semi-monthly pay period ended July 15, 2000XX. Use the tax withholding table shown in lesson 12-2 or in your book on page 347 and 348. Tax rates of 6.2 for Social Security, 1.5 for Medicare, and it says right in the directions, neither employee has reached the tax base, okay? For each employee, withhold $60 for health insurance and $15 for U.S. savings bonds per pay period. So right now, what we need to do is we have to spend a little bit of time and fill in our payroll register. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to move across and I'm going to do my earnings first. So right now for Judy Hensley, I need to add her 1,040 plus her 39, and that's going to give me regular earnings of 1,079 for Judy. Do you see how I got that math? I'm going to do the same thing for Mike. I'm going to add 920, and I'm going to add 5175. So I'm going to have total earnings of $971.75 for Mike McCune. Don't worry about the bottom column. I forgot to fill out the top. Semi-monthly pay period ending July 15th. And date of payment is going to be July 15th. I forgot to fill in the top portion. I oftentimes forget that on my payroll registers. Now, I need to calculate Judy's federal income tax. So, Judy, married or single? What page do I go to? 348, right? So you have to find Judy's federal income tax. Again, I told you to bring your book with you. I got 58. Anyone else agree? Nope, wrong. I went down too far. 48? Yep. I went down to 1,179, not 1,079. I'm going to do the same thing for Mike. And the reason I'm doing both of theirs at the same time because I'm in the book already, so I'm doing one person's federal income tax, so then I would do the next person's federal income tax. Mike is single, and he's earned $971. Marcus, what'd you get for that one? Still looking? I got 95. Are you on the right page, Michelle? Single? Okay. I get it. That's one of the first things that I always mess up. I always double check. What page am I on for married or single? Did you find it on single page to make sure you got it right? Okay. What's going to happen, though, let me point this out to you. If I did the math wrong here for total earnings, this number would be wrong. What else would be wrong? My federal income tax would be wrong. My Social Security tax would be wrong. My Medicare tax would be wrong. So miscalculating this number here will make everything be wrong for that employee. Slow down, double check. Okay, that's all I can say about payroll is slow down, make sure it gets done correctly. Now, Social Security, they told us in the directions that Social Security tax is 6.2, so I'm going to use my calculator and do 1,079 times 0.062. Watch your rounding. So I got 6690. You can do the same thing for Mike. Take his total earnings of 971.75. Multiply that by 0.062. Libby, what did you get for Social Security tax for Mike? Didn't get it yet? Okay. Devin got it. What'd you get, Devin? Nice. Good rounding. 60.25. Now, Medicare. Take, for Judy, I'm going to do first 1,079.0145. We're not doing anything new so far. All we're doing is just putting it actually on our accounting form that we would use to record payroll. Abby, I see that you got Medicare done. What did you get for Judy? Thank you. Do the same thing for Mike. Dylan, what did you get for Mike's Social Security, Medicare? Yep. Now, health insurance. What did they tell us in the directions? 60 for each employee, so I'm just going to put 60 in. Now, other. What did they tell us? You have a savings bonds for 15, so I have to put 15 in. Now, the next part that we need to do right here for deductions is I need my total deductions. But I need you to see how deductions spans the heading, goes from federal income tax to here. So I need to add up for Judy, federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, other, and put the total right there. And then I would do the same thing for Mike. Add up federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, health, and other, and put the total there. Do the math twice. My biggest advice to you is I add it up once, I enter it in, and then I go back and I add again. Why? Just to make sure that I have it done right. Or if you're using a calculator that you can see the numbers that you have added it in, I go back and double check that I didn't do anything, but I still suggest adding it twice. I have one more column left to do. Devin, how am I going to calculate my last column? Okay, but instead of just saying total and total, let's do the, I'm going to put in my calculator first my earnings total of $1,079, and I'm going to subtract what, Devin? My deduction total of $205.55, and that's going to give me my net pay. Oh, I added instead of subtracting. Okay, one of the things that we know in accounting classes, no matter what we do, there's always a way to prove things, correct? We don't have debits and credits to prove on Payroll Register, but we can go through and prove our Payroll Register. And I need you to think of the Payroll Register in 3 chunks: earnings, deductions, net pay. The first thing I need to do right now is calculate my totals for my total earnings. Sorry. So when we take a look at your payroll register, again, we have 3 sections. Right here, at the bottom of each payroll register, at the end of the pay period, we have to go through and we have to come up with our totals. There. And we don't have any other heading. Why don't I need to put a date there? Yeah. The date's at the very top. We know this is going to be the total for this pay period ending July 15th. Does that make sense? Now, I'm going to add regular, overtime, and total. Stop there. Don't keep going any further. Just add up those 3 columns. By default, when we type into Applia, it gives us a double line below. And what does a double line always tell us? That things equal or prove. Would you agree? Now, how do I know that I have proved this? Again, you need to think of a payroll register in 3 chunks. Don't do the rest of the totals yet. Okay? I need to prove the first chunk. How do I prove the first chunk? I take my regular totals plus my overtime totals, and that needs to equal what? My total earnings. Does that make sense? Do that right now. You need to take 1,960 plus 9075, and it needs to equal that number there. If it doesn't, stop. This is the second most common mistake students make in this chapter. The first one is on the employee's earnings record. The second one is not being able to prove your payroll register. You have to prove it in 3 steps. First, prove your total earnings. What do you think step 2 is to prove? The deductions. And the third thing would be to prove your net pay. That's why you have 3 headings going across the top. You prove them in 3 steps. Does your total earnings prove? Does your total regular earnings plus your total overtime earnings equal your total earnings? Yes? We agree? The next thing that you're going to do is then add up all your deductions, starting with federal income tax all the way down to total deductions. Don't do your net pay yet. Now, Marcus, you were raising your hand last time and telling me how to prove total earnings. Can you tell me how to prove total deductions?
You have to add up all the taxes and the total taxes, right? Federal income tax.
Yep. And this is where you need to take the time to do it. I can guarantee you many of you will lose like 50-some points because you don't do this. Easily, because each one of these are points. Does that make sense? Their assignments, you're going to find that it's going to be each box. So I'm giving you a heads up, okay? So when you take a look at federal income tax right here, I'm going to add 143 plus 127.15 plus 27.74 plus 120 plus 30. These numbers added up needs to equal my total deductions. If it doesn't, where was my mistake? Only in here. Does that make sense? How I find and fix my mistakes is I would then re-add down just to see if I made a mistake there. Okay, if I didn't make a mistake there, I would re-add here for my total deductions to make sure I didn't make a mistake adding across, because that could be the case. What if I did make a mistake and my total deductions was incorrect? What else would be incorrect then? My net pay. We work from left to right proving, because if we make a mistake here, what's going to happen? Everything to the right is going to be wrong for that individual. So it doesn't make any sense to prove over here, because this will cause other things to change. Now, to figure out and prove our net pay, I am going to take my 2 net pays amount. And again, remember, this is only for 2 employees. Imagine somebody that has 50. To calculate, to prove my net pay, I'm going to take my total earnings, $2,050.75. I'm going to do what? Subtract what? My total deductions, and that's going to give me my net pay. If that doesn't prove, where's the mistake? It should be my total deductions. It should be that I did the math incorrectly here to my net pay. So if you start here on the right and this doesn't prove to start with, you don't know where it is, because you need to make sure that these equal. And then you need to prove that your deductions equal. Then you need to prove that your net pay. This tends to be the most confusing part for students for this section, is making sure they know how to prove your payroll register. So right now our payroll register proves. Are we happy? Yay? Mine doesn't. What am I off on? Oh, yes, I have an extra 0. Good Lord. The rest of it's okay, though, right? 0086. Good eye, Dylan. You deserve you want a cookie? All right, cookie. Now we have to do our employee earnings record. I need to go to my directions. I just did instruction number 1. Total the amount columns for the payroll register, prove the payroll register. Oh, we did that one. Number 3, prepare a quarterly earnings record for Mrs. Henley for the quarter ending September 30th, 2000. So I'm going to go through and put that in here. September 30th. Jordan, you know how to do this already? You have it done. You know how to do it. You want to teach everyone? Okay, then how about we not distract everyone else? Did you do the on your own? Okay, go ahead and do that. You said you already know how to do it. Then do it. Employee earnings record for Miss Hensley. So we go back up on top. Judy Hensley, you can see, is going to be employee number 5. And we're going to put in her last name of Hensley. First name is going to be Judy. And how about middle initial? Did we find anything for that? Nope, we didn't find anything. That we'll leave that blank. Marital status, we know that Judy is married. Number of withholding allowances is going to be 2. Rate of pay is given to us in the directions of $13. Her Social Security number is also given to the directions. And her position is a sales clerk. Now, the other thing that I need to have is they go through and quarterly, a business needs to fill in and report their employees' taxes, depending on how many employees they have and how much is deducted. So that is why this is a quarterly report. I have, from the previous earnings records, Judy's previous accumulated earnings. It gave us to us in the directions. But really, what a person that does employee payroll does is they would look at their previous payroll register and they would see what the number is and they would just carry it forward. Our directions tell us that Judy has $13,520. Okay? And again, that's a number that's just given to us in the directions. What I need to do right now is I need to take my information from my payroll register and put it down here in my earnings record. So I'm going to put in the date of July, they do numbers down there, 7/15, and I'm really going to carry Judy's numbers down. Everything we already calculated. Yep, you got to do a number. So this is relatively easy because we did all of the hard work where? On the top. Why do we calculate all the numbers on the payroll register and not on the earnings record? Think about proving. Would I be able to prove this? Would it give me my total net pay right away, which is what a business wants to know first, how much does it cost them? So we always do our payroll register first, then transfer to the individual employee records. The last column here is my accumulated earnings, and this is what we use to determine whether or not they've reached or met that $87,000 tax base for taking out Social Security and Medicare. To calculate this, it's really easy, but students tend to take these two numbers and add them together, and that's wrong. I need to take $13,520 and add $1,079. When I add those two numbers together, I get my new number for there. It's not hard. You're just adding. But students go through and say, oh, I'm just going to add the net pay. And that's why I spent time before saying, hey, we need to make sure that we're doing accumulated earnings, not accumulated net pay. So we can see Judy should have $14,599 in accumulated earnings. Did I do that math correctly, Dawn? All right.